Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening.
Dr. Awinda Otieno.
Yes, good evening.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I am okay.
Very good. How is Uganda?
Uganda is okay. You are most welcome.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if we have Mr. Ochanda Mathew. I think that we will begin even if they are not there. Today, the topic is the leveraging climate change mitigation to safeguard jobs. Strategies for a greener and more resilient East Africa. I would like to begin by welcoming all those who are present and by welcoming you. And thanks a lot. I pray that today the network doesn't disappoint us.
Hopefully.
I start by belief that this phrase refers to using climate change mitigation efforts as a way to protect and create jobs while building sustainable, resilient economy in East Africa. But what does it mean and why does it matter? Leveraging climate change mitigation means various things to Africans, and also it means other things to the Western people. But in my mind, it ought to mean our encouraging of our nation to use actions that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, like renewable energies, sustainable agriculture, and green infrastructure as tools or opportunities to help us and our nation to move forward in a better way. While to safeguard jobs, in my mind, ought to emphasize the protecting of the existing employment and creating new job opportunities, especially in vulnerable sectors affected by climate change. Strategies for greener and more resilient East Africa, I believe, must point to policy and investment approaches that promote environmental sustainability and economic resilience, not only across countries like Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, etc., but across Africa in general and the rest of the world, without the double standard that normally occurs from industrialized countries, because they are actually the ones who have factories and huge industries that are affecting the climate, and we in African countries are the ones suffering the consequences of their industrialization. Key ideas behind this concept for us to discuss today ought to include green jobs creation, which in my mind is investing in renewable energy, sustainable farming, and eco-friendly industries that can generate employment while reducing environmental harm. While we have to also think about impartial transition, which is just, and ensuring that workers in traditional sectors like fossil fuels or deforestation-linked industries are supported with training and opportunities to shift into green sectors. Apart from that, we have problems with climate adaptation and resilience, which we need to work hard to strengthen its infrastructure in the fields of agriculture and urban planning to withstand climate shocks like droughts or floods, because it is those factors that help to protect livelihoods and economic stability. I remember a few weeks ago, and also some months ago, we had rain here in Kampala, and so many hybrid vehicles got spoiled because of flooding due to poor infrastructure. As a result, I have had friends who have gone back to the bonds to return their hybrid vehicles because there are no good mechanics to take care of, and our roads are not properly. I don't know even how to explain. We do not have proper roads. Therefore, flooding is also discouraging those who want to buy hybrid vehicles to buy them, because when it rains and their vehicles get stuck in flood, it gets spoiled and there are no proper mechanics to work on them. So they lose millions and they have to spend millions instead of using those vehicles as part of preventing problems that are being caused by the old model vehicles. So we have to think about practical solutions for African cities, African countries, African continent, while also advocating for industrialized countries to reduce their carbon emission. As part of my introduction, I will stop here and I give the mic to Doctor. So Doctor, you are welcome to give us the wisdom of what you have for us today. Dr. Danice Otieno Awinda, you are welcome to give
Yes,
us your opinion.
thank you, Dr. Oling. I want to start by greeting each one of us. Good evening,
Good evening.
comrades.
Good evening, Chief.
Yes, my name has been said. I'm Dr. Awinda Otieno from Kabarak University, Kenya. And this is, I think, the fourth time I'm appearing in this webinar. Some of them have been a keynote speaker, and last week I was a moderator. So I want to give my opinion on the subject today, leveraging climate change mitigation to safeguard jobs, strategies for greener and more resilient East Africa. But now I'm talking about environment generally, so that that one covers the environment in East Africa, in Africa, and also in the whole world. Now, I want to start by saying that climate change is just a long-term alteration of temperature, precipitation, wind patterns, and other aspects of Earth's climate system, mainly caused by human activities such as burning fossil fuels and deforestation. And we are saying that this climate change is not only an environmental issue, but it is also a workers' issue, because today we are trying to focus on creation of jobs and how climate change affects the workforce. As has been said by the moderator, that we are talking about coming up with the actions which can be able to protect us from greenhouse gases. We know, we are all aware that the main producers, the main contributors of climate change are countries that have already developed, which include the Americas, and also we have the Europe and all those countries which are industrialized already. And you find that because of vulnerability, the African countries or African population bear the burden because of probably lack of technology. We talk about poverty and many other factors which work against African countries. So climate change, you're saying, is not only an issue of environment, but it is a workers' issue. So that when crops are ruined by drought, when factories are swept away by floods, or when outdoor workers are endangered by heat waves, it is working people usually who suffer. Those who work are the ones who suffer. But in this crisis also lies, there's also a chance that we can be able to capitalize on. And the chance here is to take actions on climate change. Then we can protect existing jobs and create millions of new green and decent jobs. We are talking about coming up with those actions, which include renewable energy systems. We talk about sustainable agriculture or climate smart agricultural activities, or enterprises that are climate smart, which can be able to protect us against the effects of climate change. And as we know that mitigation sometimes will take long, usually we talk about adaptation. So probably we need to come up with those strategies that can help us to adapt, not just mitigating, because I know that sometimes mitigation may take a very long time. So it calls for us to come up with actions to be able to adapt to these effects of climate change. So we are asking a question that can climate action protect jobs? And we say yes. The shift to renewable energy, energy efficiency, and sustainable industries is already generating jobs. The renewable energy sector alone also employs about 13 million people worldwide. Excuse me, can you unmute? Can you mute? Dr. Oling, can you ask this?
Please, Jennifer, may you kindly mute?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So my question is that can climate action protect jobs? We say yes, because if you can be able to shift to renewables or energy efficiency and sustainable industries, then we are saying that we can have jobs. We can have jobs being generated. So the renewable energy sector now employs quite a number of people worldwide, and the statistic has that about 13 million people who are employed worldwide from green energy sector alone. And the figure is still growing as we also expand on these renewable energy resources. But the message is green jobs must also be good jobs as well, not just jobs, but it's good jobs. They must provide decent wages, safe working conditions, and the right to organize. And then climate action that tramples on workers' rights is not progress, but it is exploitation. So I think that the climate action must be that which will be able to create the jobs, that's green jobs. And if we have some strategies that we can talk about, so that we can be able to come up with action against the climate change. And one of these strategies is that we must invest in green training and skills. Carbon-intensive industry workers, miners, we talk about mechanics, factory workers cannot be left behind. Governments, employers, and unions must work together to retrain and upskill them for jobs in renewable energy, sustainable construction, and circular economy industry. We're talking about industry. The circular economy means that we have industries that can be able to circulate, so that one industry produces waste, another industry takes that waste as a raw material for production of something else, so that we can have recycling of waste, and that will help us also to be able to reduce the impact of climate change. We also need to have some social dialogue. Unions must have a seat at the table where climate and economic policy is determined. We can utilize collective bargaining to insist that climate policy protects workers' rights and contains provisions on just transition. We talk about environment-friendly practices and safe working conditions during extreme weather periods. Then third, we must mobilize investment in climate-resilient infrastructure, solar and wind power, modern transport, reforestation, and climate-smart agriculture. And these initiatives not only cut the emissions, but also provide decent jobs, especially for the young, for the youth, and also for the rural populations. Then, as we move on, we are saying that the trade unions must have a seat at the table where we are coming up with climate change policy. And that one will also help in ensuring that the jobs that we're going to have will be green, and also will be able to protect, will be able to overcome the effects of climate change. Now, what's the role of these trade unions then? Now, the unions have always been the voice of justice and solidarity, and today we must clear the path to a just transition, a transition that is fair, inclusive, and led by workers. And therefore, we must include climate clauses in collective bargaining agreements, fight for good green jobs in national climate policies, advocate for workers' education on climate awareness, and build alliance with environmental and community movements. And therefore, the future work must be green, but also fair and democratic. So you have work that is green, fair, and also democratic. So, in conclusion of my submission, we are saying that climate change threatens jobs, our health, and future. But by leveraging measures to mitigate this climate change, by investing in human beings and not just technology, we can turn this crisis into an opportunity for shared prosperity. Are we able to come up with measures that can help us to mitigate, or actions that can help us to adapt to the effects of climate change? And then by the end of the day, we'll be able to have decent jobs and also green jobs. So let us join together to make every green job a decent job, to leave no worker behind, and to keep our planet safe and hospitable home for generations of workers to come. And therefore, we are saying that in solidarity and hope, let us make the green transition a workers' transition. Thank you very much. Back to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I believe we still do not have a guest of honors, if I may call it. I may request Danice. We have TEAMEnvironment Kenya. May we have the opinion of TEAMEnvironment Kenya?
Thank you, Dr. Oling. I'm glad and grateful to be part of this conversation, and just to share my views, opinion, and suggestions in view of the subject matter being discussed. Thank you, Dr. Awinda, for that expansive and extensive sharing. It's been very, very deep and profound. While listening to you, being my professor, I have been taking notes as well. And thank you for this opportunity to share. Indeed, it is a very timely subject matter of discussion, a global concern, and the subject matter being leveraging climate mitigation and to safeguard jobs. And therefore, having the backdrop that climate change and global warming has devastated many lives and livelihoods across the globe. But most important, the people that have had this adverse effect of climate change, has been the African continent and its communities. So in reference to the theme or the subject matter of discussion is, what are the strategies for ought we to have of a greener and that therefore will be able to facilitate and necessitate building resilience in East Africa. And maybe just to start is that the three surest ways of combating climate change definitely are mitigation measures, adaptation, and building resilience. Resilience is the ability to weather the storms, to have the tenacity to weather the storms that that we are prone to facing against harsh weather conditions and against floods and other natural or otherwise happenings that have ravaged lives and livelihoods. In Kenya, in Uganda, in East Africa, we have had seasons when I don't know whether it's because of lack of preparedness, but even if we are prepared, we have not had sufficient infrastructure that has cushioned communities against extreme floods and harsh weather conditions. And some of which, maybe in some communities in Kenya, we have had households and houses being submerged in water. Some of them definitely constructed on riparian areas or on waterways or in areas where the water table or water levels is fairly low. So as it rains heavily from upstream and the water comes downstream, it founds, and in the effort of finding its pathway, it gets itself in human habitation, and therefore destroying homes and homesteads. We have just concluded a conference which we had dubbed Sustainable Development Goals, Climate Action Innovation Conference. It was hosted at the USIU, and for the 2 days we finished yesterday. And amongst many other things that we discussed, we had a critical discussion on the role of AI and technology and innovation in combating climate change. And we had students from St. Mary's School, USIU. We had students from JQuat and KU really coming up with innovation, and some had even had a robot they developed. In fact, they are flying out tomorrow to Panama for a robotic contest or competition. This is one of the many that they have attended. And this robot, technically, we had it on location, and they demonstrated on its ability to help combat climate change. And to be more precise, it was able to detect and help the location where garbage is, and prompt the relevant agencies through the necessary communication ability to notify them of where it is located. And this robot is able to be taken on site, and it helps to pick and collect it. So it was very, very innovative. And in this regard, because waste management or lack of the proper mechanisms to manage or collect waste has necessitated or is a contributing factor to climate change. So this innovation of using AI, of using technology, is very timely and relevant to ensure that it helps in not just combating or rather causing adaptation, but helps in combating climate change by being able to detect waste and being able to collect it practically and literally, and help and deliver it to designated site. So whereas it may seem like it is a threat to job creation, or the many manual ways of creating of jobs for people that manually collect it, the technological application using AI has really is going to play a significant role and important role going into the future. You know very well that the age in which we are living in is the technological age, and at this point in time, artificial intelligence really playing a critical role. But I want also to emphasize that artificial intelligence ought not to be a threat as such, not as far as climate change mitigation and adaptation is concerned, because its ability to function is dependent on human input. Like robot, we needed to have a remote gadget that is able to operate it and therefore help it to function. So ideally it is a complementary measure that to ensure that action, mitigation, and adaptation resilience measures are promptly actioned. And therefore, in this conversation, I want to really echo the fact that it's high time that we embrace the use of technology, the use of AI, the use of robots in this case, to ensure that climate change is not just combated, it is mitigated, and adaptation measures are really employed. Professor Awinda has spoken aptly, saying that adaptation and mitigation measures definitely will take time and resources. The just concluded African Climate Summit that happened in Ethiopia a month ago, the subject matter that was on the table, that was discussed expansively and extensively by the delegates and the speakers, was adaptation measures. And adaptation definitely is the surest way to combat climate change, even now, because mitigation definitely requires, it is a very resource intensive approach. You need money, for instance, to establish, for instance, in this case, let's use a key classic example, the most definite that we all are aware of. For instance, a tree nursery establishment, propagating seedlings. You need to get quality seeds. You need to get potting materials. You need to have a technical and not very technical team that will provide manual labor, which will be able to propagate quality seeds. It takes time to have seedlings propagated and to get to the age or the right size to be replanted. After they've been planted, there is needed to be post care for several months before they can grow on their own. And in tree growing, which is the low hanging fruit in climate change mitigation, we have to have the trees planted really protected from any form of invasion. This can be human or even animals being domestic or wild animals. So for a tree to grow, and in this case, let me use the example of indigenous trees, for the planter or the people that have planted them, for them to be able to benefit from the carbon credit, having the trees grown to the level So I want to
At TEAMEnvironment Kenya, I guess you are facing problems with the network.
Yeah, I think it is network.
Okay. We have had brothers and sisters who had joined us earlier, and one of them is Madam Jane Muthoni Gitahi. May we have Jane give us her opinion? Jane Muthoni, can you hear
climate
us?
change, and therefore being able to manage the situation at hand. By that, I want to submit. Thank you so much.
Okay, TEAMEnvironment Kenya, thank you so much. We lost you for a few seconds, but
Yes, my network has been a bit unstable, but I've been able to, I can finish at that. Thank you.
It's okay, God bless you. I wanted us to hear from Jane Muthoni Gitahi if she is available. If not, we proceed. Jane, can you hear us? Okay. May we listen to Olivia Nasuna?
Hello, good evening. This is Olivia Nasuna from WOFAU, Uganda Fisheries and Allied Workers Union. I've heard what the former what the farmer said. But my worry is, since we are in developing country, yes, the AI is very good, but that issue of losing jobs, yet we are fighting poverty, that it might as well affect the employment more so for the youth. But when we come, for us who are the fishmongers, it is really good because you find a lot of wastage in our lakes, and then it sometimes affects the production of fish. Thank you.
You are most welcome. May we hear from Isaac Godwin? Do you have something to say, Isaac? Okay. May we hear from Ismail? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, is there anyone who wants to say something? Okay, in that case, I will say something and then get back to Doctor. I will talk about what we have been talking about, which I believe we have to still continue talking about our own real world relevance in East Africa regarding the subject we are talking about. And the most important thing for us in East Africa and Africa in general is actually agriculture. Whether we are going to talk about what Madame has talked about in the field of fishing or agriculture, still, those are the kind of things we depend upon, and they are interrelated because they are actually the major employer sectors in Africa. And yet, agriculture is highly neglected in most of our countries, although they employ the majority of the people in African countries. So, because agriculture is highly vulnerable to climate change, we need mitigation strategies like agroforestry or climate-smart farming, which can protect yields and jobs. Urban development, on the other hand, our cities can adopt green building codes and invest in public transport, creating jobs while reducing emissions, like other countries have begun to adopt. We also have to talk about youth employment, which is a growing problem in African countries because the majority of our population are youth. So with a growing youth population, East Africa can tap into green sectors to address unemployment and build future-ready skills, not just leave our young men to start running away from agriculture into border business, giving us even much more climate problems in cities and towns than solving their financial problems. Other than that, we also need some kind of climate action in East Africa that can genuinely protect jobs by shifting industries in Africa towards sustainability and improved working conditions through safer work environments that I have witnessed with my own eyes in many places, many factories in our countries. The work environments are not safe at all. We also need to build a greener future by investing in renewable energies, not only climate smart agriculture, and not only eco-friendly infrastructure, but how can such transformation help us across the key sectors in Uganda, for example, or in East Africa, or in Africa? It helps us to protect jobs through green transitions in the fields of agriculture if we have climate-smart farming techniques like agroforestry, like drip irrigation that was used in the past when there is drought. And we can also adopt drought-resistant crops to help stabilize yields of crops and to protect jobs in regions where agriculture employs more than 60 or 70% or even more than 80% of the workforce, such as the Lao sub-region where I come from. We also need to encourage our people to engage in renewable energy usage, such as expanding solar systems, wind, and hydropower to create new jobs by having them installed in huge numbers in areas where they could be, because they are actually easy to maintain, although difficult to acquire because of lack of capital. The majority of people in rural areas cannot afford such simple things, and yet they could help us with climate change. They could help us reduce and be or keep away from fossil fuels, although we are actually moving towards it in Uganda more than moving away from it. Other factors could be ecotourism and conservation by protecting diversity and biodiversity of what we have in our countries, to promote sustainable tourism, to generate employment in the fields of hospitality, guiding, park management. And Kenya has been very good in the past years in the field of tourism, but not in the field of ecotourism. So I think that we could begin to encourage our nation to engage in such things so that we can help our countries to move towards a greener nation than we are at the moment. I beseech Doctor, is there anyone who wants to give an opinion regarding the subject we are talking about? Waitu? Okay. Is there anyone who wants to give an opinion? Dr. Danice?
Yes, Dr.
If you are
Oling.
there, I believe you can add from the wisdom that you have for us to learn from you.
Thank you, Dr. Oling. Just to add on what I've said, which I'll add to what I just discussed earlier, we are talking about leveraging climate mitigation to safeguard jobs, which simply means that we use efforts to reduce climate impacts in ways that protect workers' livelihoods, and stimulate green job creation. And as I want just to support what your opinion on the mechanisms that we can have to safeguard the jobs, especially when we mitigate climate change effects. As I said, mitigation sometimes may need a lot of resources. It may take time because we are talking about reduction of carbon emissions, or prevention of carbon emissions. And if you are going to reduce the carbon emissions or prevent carbon emissions from industries, it means that therefore we must have to close some industries so that we minimize the amount of carbon that is coming in the atmosphere, which leads to climate change. And therefore, the most appropriate and the most easier way of dealing with climate change probably will be on adaptation, whereby we come up with measures to cope with the problem as it is. And by the end of it all, we should be able to have our production going up in the face of climate change, because climate change is there and we have to live with it. We are saying that the main contributors of greenhouse gases are those countries that are developed already, but the burden is felt much more in countries that are very vulnerable, especially the third world countries in Africa, Latin America, and also some parts of Asia. So you'll find that those countries usually bear the burden. And therefore, we need to come up with some mechanisms. What do we have to do? We have talked about renewable energy projects, which include solar, wind, bioenergy, to generate new jobs in installation, maintenance, and also manufacturing. In Kenya, for example, we have had a lot of investments in renewable energy sector, that is in terms of geothermal, because we have a lot of deposits of steam in the Rift Valley. So a lot has been done, and I would say that quite a big, a good amount of energy or electricity is in the national grid, about up to about 500 megawatts. So that means that there's a very good effort, because the fossil fuels will obviously pollute our environment. So we are moving away from that by coming up with sources like solar. We talk about wind, we talk about geothermal, and we are calling upon all our countries, possibly that can we change to move from the brown energy to green energy, so that we avoid emissions of carbon, and this one will take us to another level. We talk about energy efficient retrofits in buildings, which require construction and technical workers to be able to ensure that we have energy efficient buildings. Then we talk about sustainable agriculture. I think I mentioned it earlier, and to support also what Dr. Oling has just to that we need to come up with such climate smart agriculture that supports farmers while creating jobs in forestry, organic farming, and also soil restoration. We need to come up with, especially which will raise indigenous trees which are able to cope with climatic conditions in those areas. So we need to come up with that, and that one will help us also to fight the climate change. We are talking about circular economy initiatives. I also mentioned it. In circular economy, we are talking about recycling, we talk about repair, sustainable waste management, which creates job employment in new value chains. We are saying that waste is not bad, but waste is a resource. It's a misplaced resource for that matter, because we are aware that there are people, there are companies that can be able to recycle waste into something else. Like for example, we talk about newspaper into tissue paper, and that one can be able to reduce the amount of waste within the environment, but at the same time creating jobs. We also know that we can get some energy from waste through technologies like pyrolysis. We have combustion, we have gasification. All those techniques can be used to convert the waste that we have into energy, and those ones can still be sources of jobs, and we'll have green jobs created from that. And by the end of the day, the waste is also recycled, and therefore you reduce it. Now, companies can also retain workers by shifting from linear production models to sustainable practices. so that you don't just have a linear whereby you talk about production from the beginning raw materials until you go to the waste, and then the waste is disposed of. We are talking about companies having the workers being trained in a way that we can have the recycling of those materials that are being produced from those companies. We also need to reskill our workers, the workforce, and also empower them. So workers from carbon-intensive sectors, as I said, can be retrained for green jobs. Governments and trade unions can play a role in this transition program by ensuring that no worker is left behind. And that one is very, very important. But again, what is very important here is that we also need to look at the policies in place and our investment strategies. What are the governments doing in ensuring that they also look at they also reduce the amount of carbon emissions that are being generated? And initially, governments can come up with what we call market-based instruments. They can always employ them. Instruments like taxation and also subsidies, whereby you'll find that those companies that are producing greenhouse gases, although those are involved in production where we have a lot of pollution taking place, those companies we can have taxes. But those that are coming up with the green and production processes, like for example, green energy, talk about solar, talk about wind, talk about geothermal, then you can have subsidies, whereby you can talk about zero rating of certain equipment, so that as they import this equipment, because they're involved in green energy production, then they find it cheaper to be able to import, and then they can be able to get a lot of profits because they're involved in green production. So we're talking about industries being encouraged by being given those subsidies so that they can be able to have those green practices which will protect us from climate change effects. So we have that. And then you talk about public-private partnerships. It's also very important to support both climate action and job retention. So we're talking about how do we have the public sector coming up with the private sector to partner together so that we can have climate action being championed. And then that one also will lead to job creation. So we are talking about, in that case, we're talking about such activities like, for example, waste management again. You'll find that our governments, the county governments, municipal authorities sometimes are overwhelmed by the amount of waste that is produced. And therefore, they're not able to manage the waste properly. So in that case, therefore, we can have a partnership between public and private, whereby the management of waste is being privatized. And in that case, therefore, we reduce the amount of waste that gets in the environment. Okay, so we can talk about some examples of application. We talk about examples like in the energy sector. We talk about transitioning from coal power plants to solar farms, retaining workers in new roles. So we change from the coal, which is so polluting, into solar farms, which is less polluting. But by the end of the day, again, you still be able to have the work being retained. In transport, we talk about promotion of electric buses with the local manufacturing and maintenance jobs that can be done. But also we can the use of the small vehicles in the environment. So we can be able to change our transport system so that in our cities we discourage the small cars, but now we have the buses that can always transport many people in that case. In agriculture, we look at implementation of agroforestry. Yes. We talk about climate smart crop varieties, creating new job opportunities, and those ones will help us to leverage. So we are saying that it is important that we transit from our old ways of production systems to coming up with green production systems. So let us join together. We make green job a decent job, and we don't have to leave people behind, but to have all of us being empowered and also being put on board to be able to have this kind of change. So let us make the green transition a workers' transition. Thank you very much once again, Dr. Oling.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Danice. I would like to invite any brother or sister who have opinion to give regarding what we are talking about, because those who were supposed to be the guest of honors, some of them, I don't see them. So is there anyone who wants to give opinion?
Dr. Oling?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Just want to reiterate what Dr. Awinda has aptly presented on. I was wanted to speak about the use of e-mobility. I don't know about other countries, but Kenya has made significant strides in view as far as transitioning from the normal fuel use energy to green mobility, mostly in our transport sector. And a big input on it has being facilitated by government is on electric motorbikes. We have so many electric moving companies, different organizations, different companies, and have come in to replace the fuel running, or oil or petrol, or petrol or diesel running in each engine. And I want to say that the season where the cost of fuel running engines was so expensive, and many with the influx of Uber, it was a very lucrative business at some point in Nairobi, Kenya, and in many other cities. And the cost of fuel at some point went as far as 200 shillings on 180, 190. It hasn't reduced as much, but many were put out of business as a result of the high cost of fuel. And the recent come through of electric moving vehicles, most of which are definitely Uber, it has significantly it created a very great ripple effect in terms of creating more opportunity, because the use of electric vehicles, EVs, the cost of fuel running vehicles comparatively was almost up to 40%. Up to 40% with a fuel with an electric moving vehicle compared to a fuel running engine. And therefore it has significantly increased jobs opportunity, and therefore supporting many lives and livelihoods. And that is on Ubers or on small cars. Speaking about the motor vehicles, we have had a huge import of the electric moving motorcycles. And like Professor Awinda has reported, most of these imports are zero rated on tax, and therefore encouraging more import on the same. Even the cost of an electric motor vehicle is significantly low. And to ensure that many communities, many people are supported, we even have had financial institutions, banks, microfinancing, really enabling individuals who would want to venture into this business. And I know quite a number that have done that. And this venture, electric mobility, has come in to benefit communities in two ways. One is definitely providing a source of livelihood and support to individuals, households, and communities. And in another way, having come to significantly reduce the effects of climate change by using clean, green, sustainable, and renewable energy. And you know very well that some of these electric engines or facilities are solar powered, are solar engine powered, and therefore it is it's a double win in view of that. But maybe just to finish is that in our quest and effort to combat climate change as an organization, unlike government and through its different agencies, they have public-private partnership. We have adopted a way of doing it in 3 ways: public, private, and community partnership. For us to succeed, for you to succeed in any quest to combat climate change, you need to have a buy-in of the community. The community should be able to understand what would be their role in ensuring that we're able to win together. So for instance, in adopting or in green practices, we need to be able to have a perfect information sharing and dissemination to ensure that communities really are able to buy in, even in for them to be able to install, for instance, solar panels on the rooftop of their houses, for them to be able to buy or acquire through different agencies like GIZ has been very big on supporting villages, homesteads in villages, not to use three-stone cooking stove, whose fuel definitely is charcoal. So they have gone into through a very structured way in many communities in Kenya to go into homesteads and households, and they construct ceramic cooking stove, and that are fuel efficient. They don't use fuel, but they use what we call briquettes. Briquettes are definitely made from efficient cooking mechanism, cooking fuel. Briquette made from waste such as bagasse, or we have in some places it's made using water. It's called fire hyacinth, the one that is extracted from the lake and oceans. Others is made from out of rice husks, rice waste. Others made out of wood waste, and many other byproducts that are used for making briquette, which is clean, green, efficient, and sustainable. And finally, bamboo. You know very well, bamboo is a very, very versatile plant. It's used for combating climate change, used for making furniture, but most importantly, bamboo, giant bamboo to be precise, it's firewood, or it's wood. It's for making briquette, but it burns longer and much more faster, and therefore being able to supplement the use of wood fuel as charcoal, as cooking fuel, or as firewood. So such are the innovative measures that communities, government, and institutions need to employ to ensure that they facilitate, they necessitate, and enable communities to adopt green living practices, and in the process help to combat climate change. With that, I want to submit and say thank you so much for inviting me to be one of the speakers and presenters in these evenings or this day's subject matter of discussion. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. I would like to extend few minutes to those who have opinion to give, since the time has elapsed. It is 9, but because the subject matter is important, if there is any one of the participants who want to at least give an opinion, we can extend some few minutes. Is there anyone who wants to say something? Okay. I would like to, not in conclusion, but I would like to say something about inclusive growth regarding climate investments. Climate investments can be designed at least to prioritize our marginalized communities, which is constituted of mostly women and the rural population. If that is done by our governments, It will ensure equitable access to green jobs for women and those in the rural populations, because they are the most affected in African countries. Also, we need strategic actions to accelerate the impact of what we are talking about or discussing in this forum. For example, public-private partnerships must include collaborations not only between governments and governments, but also between governments and non-governmental organizations and businesses, because it is only through those who are holding high stake in this matter that we are talking about that can scale green job programs and fund climate resilience projects in villages. If it will not reach our villages in Africa, all these things that we are talking about will not help, because the majority of our population are actually living in rural areas, not in capital cities and not in towns. Apart from that, education and training in most cases does not include the rural population and the women and the villagers, and yet those are the people who are mostly affected. And I think that the idea of vocational programs and training ought to begin to focus on the rural people if we are talking about education and training in the field of renewable energy, in the field of sustainable agriculture, and in the field of green construction, which in the long term will equip workers in general and the rural people with the skills that they need for low carbon economy. It is not only in towns that we have to think about having the implementation policy for reducing or for having a low carbon economy. Apart from that, we have also to encourage our politicians, our ministers, our lawyers, our policymakers to have some kind of policy alignment that include the people who elect them into position of authorities. Because in most cases, politicians are actually elected by the people in rural areas. And when they come into position of authority, they forget about those people who have elected them. So when we are going to talk about policy alignment, it has to be integrated in a way that encourages integrating climate goals into our national employment strategies, not only in Uganda or East Africa, but in Africa in general. Because it is only through that such strategies will ensure that job creation and environmental sustainability go hand in hand. By that, I give the audience opportunity again. If there is anyone who wants to give a final statement before we close for the evening, please, you are welcome.
Yes, moderator, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My name is Paul Owino. I'm impressed with your submission and deliberation on climate investment. I wish to add my voice to the submissions of other members who have already contributed. And I appreciate that climate and mankind coexists, and there should be precautions put in place to have climate that is favorable to all mankind, regardless of their levels in rank and where they stay or what they do. My observation is that activities that affect climate affect the vulnerable members of society disproportionately compared to the perpetrators of those activities. This could be corporations that are involved in manufacturing, emitting obnoxious gases into the atmosphere. This could result into climate catastrophes. However, the legal framework which regulates environmental laws, although in place, I think institutions which are charged with the responsibility to regulate climate have to be more empowered by the government, especially by enhancing the human resource and or funding to enable the execution of their duties be performed much more better than it is now, because there is fear that without regulating climate, the future may be disastrous. Now and again, we have looked at various means in which we can save the environment from depletion, especially the forest and the green environment most especially. But you'll find that it's not surprising that when you move on the countryside and in different parts of the world, you will still observe that there is a lot of construction within swamps and wetlands. There is also cultivation and farming taking place. So I agree with the submission that we need dissemination of information relating to climate change effects and all these factors that would affect the environment adversely, so that we can have sustainable development. We can also adhere to the precautionary principles and all these other doctrines which favor environmental protection. I would submit that we are still lagging. Institutions have not really stretched far into the rural areas to empower, to sensitize and disseminate information regarding to environment. It is still within the elites and within the academia. But we need also to translate environmental problems into the local languages. We need to bring this information to our rural people so that their activities also are regulated in a way, especially deforestation. You would find that charcoal burning, felling trees is such activities that are affecting the environment at the countryside. But whether institutions charged with this responsibility at every level or structure has extended information and involved every person to know the consequences, the effects in short and long run, is still a problem. My submission is that there is need to empower these institutions. There is need to reform the regulatory framework, the laws which govern environment, and to adhere to international standards given the instruments in place, such that concerns on environment is not only left to the letter of the intellectuals, but it is brought home to everyone, because man and environment cannot be separated. It can save us, it can save the future, the posterity, and is for the good of all of us. And those who are responsible for violating environmental laws, principles, should be brought to book and serve the sanctions which the laws provide. With those few remarks, I thank my colleagues who submitted before me, although I joined lately, but I'm concerned with the environment and I'm an advocate for environmental law. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Council. I am impressed, and I beg those who still have little time to wait for a moment, because the Council have raised a very important point that we have not talked about a lot. The point that the Council have talked about concerns industrialized countries, and it is those industrialized countries that contribute too much to climate change through their high greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuel usage in their countries and factories. And they have not only very huge manufacturing industries, but also very high level of deforestation, although the concentration nowadays is on African countries, which I also believe have to be taken seriously. However, still, industrialized countries are the highest drivers of climate change. If we go to find out in the history of what we are talking about, the United States and China and European Union countries and other industrialized economies, they are the ones accounting for the majority of historical carbon dioxide emissions. For example, the United States alone is written in history as contributing more than 25% of cumulative global carbon dioxide emissions. That is since 1975. And yet, when these topics are being brought, the African countries are the one held accountable. If it is a crime, it is a crime that African countries have not committed since 1750. Because the history of developed countries using coal or fossil fuel is very long, and they are not even closer to stopping it, because their economy is actually depending on fossil fuel since time immemorial. So these countries, by building their economies on coal, oil, and gas, they are the releasers of massive amount of greenhouse gases. So it is also important for our countries and advocates to put them to task to help poor countries, especially the African countries, not by giving money to politicians, but by assigning those who seek genuine solutions to the problems that we are talking about, to work hand in hand with stakeholders, the real stakeholders, not politicians. Because up to now, we are still exporting pollution. If we look at what is happening in our countries, many of the products that we bring into our countries in forms of vehicles, agricultural tools, road making tools, they are brought from those countries, and we as users are considered to be the ones who are actually increasing the problem while they are being produced there, used there, and second-hand used ones sent to us, and we are blamed. So many industrialized nations outsource manufacturing to developing countries, shifting their emissions while still driving the demand for the same. So slow climate finance, despite pledges from them like the 100 billion annual climate fund, rich nations have been very slow to deliver such financial support to help poorer countries to adapt to climate change and forthwith recover. So it is also important, if we are going to discuss these things, to put the industrialized countries to task and also to demand that their promises be fulfilled, even if they are to send experts to help in the implementation of the projects that we are discussing now. Because so many disasters linked to industrialized emissions are well documented, including the problems of floods in 2022 in Pakistan, triggered by extreme monsoon rains and glacial melt, and the floods displaced millions of Pakistani citizens, and Pakistan contributes less than 1% of global emissions, but suffers severe climate impacts. And that also involves countries like Bangladesh and ASEAN countries, the poorer one. I'm not talking about China, which is the giant there. But those poorer ones are the ones suffering the side effects of disasters linked to industrialized emissions. And also Horn of Africa droughts, which are so repeated droughts linked to climate change, have devastated agriculture and food security in Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya. All of those are well documented even by United Nations. So we need to think about all these problems and look at things that are happening in Africa, in countries like what happened in Mozambique, for example, or in Zimbabwe, or in Malawi, are all associated to warmer oceans, driving global emissions to intensify the storms that have caused problems and tropical cyclones to hit those African affected countries. We also have to think about what will happen to a country like Senegal when sea level is continuing to rise and the coastal erosion and flooding in places like St. Louis in Senegal are worsened by rising seas that caused the melting polar ice caps to direct the floods that is even being suspected to cause Senegal to cease to exist as a country. All those are global warming side effects. So for poor countries, everything that we are talking about, including food insecurity, crop failures due to erratic rainfall, or due to heat waves, or threatened livelihoods in agriculture, that we depend on in our economy are related to what is happening in industrialized countries. Health crisis, increased diseases outbreak, such as malaria, cholera, all fall of floods and heat stress. Things like migration and displacement. We can call it climate refugees or give it any fancy name that United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees have given us. But at the end of the day, climate refugees are rising as people flee areas that cannot be habitated by humans. And we have to think of something even worse than what we are discussing, that time will come when the war for waters will arise, and countries that do not have water will start to move towards countries or sources of waters like the sources of River Nile, like the Lake Victoria region. In that circumstance, what are we going to do as people who have a platform to discuss these kind of things? It is now that we have to let our leaders, our politicians, to understand what is happening as a result of climate change, so that they understand that our security in the future, or the security of our children and our great-great-grandchildren, will depend on the actions that we take today. Because if we really do not take those actions today, tomorrow wars will occur because of climate change. Wars for waters, wars for food, wars for habitation, because as I speak now, the deserts from North Africa is increasingly coming towards the central and southern parts of Africa. So what will happen to those citizens who are living in the desert and they don't have access to water or to lands for agriculture? We have to think about all those things, because if we don't think about it today, then tomorrow will be very late. It will be too late by the time we think of taking action. And by that, I beseech, if there is someone who wants to give few last statement so that we may close. Dr. Danice, you are still there?
Yes, I'm still there, Dr. Ling.
I beseech you to say final words so that we may close for the night, because I gave the floor to the brothers and sisters, and I think people are tired.
Thank you. Thank you,
You're
Dr.
welcome.
Yes, I just want to add one thing. One, I want to support what you're saying, that the action must be today. We must act on climate change effects. We must find how to come up with adaptation strategies or mitigation measures so that we protect our environment, and we're doing it for our children and our children's children, that is great-grandchildren, so that talk about sustainability, so that as we use our resources today, let us think about the future. Because if you don't do that, as you put it, we will have a lot of conflicts conflicts about food, as we said, about habitation, and many other livelihood resources that are needed. But then I want to also support what Paul was saying, that we need also to go to the communities and have them empowered. And as we do that, I think there is one thing that we should also look into. How can we strengthen the indigenous knowledge systems, especially for the local communities? Because these people have been there for a very long time, and they really understand the environments around them. And therefore, we need to come up with ways through which you can be able to have these indigenous knowledge systems on climate issues being captured. And if you can be able to have them also integrated in the modern techniques of reading the climate, for example, because these communities have got their ways of predicting the climatic conditions or climatic situation, and therefore these ways are so much indigenous to them, and we need therefore to find how we can be able to have we exploit this is those knowledge systems that can also help in coming up with strategies to adapt. But at the same time, we need also to implore upon the industrialized nations to take responsibility, because ideally, when you look at what happens, it is a conflict between the north and the south. The north countries, that is those that are developed, will always put the blame on the south countries. The south countries are also saying that they must develop because the north countries use the resources earlier from the south to develop. And therefore, we need to implore upon these north countries, that is those that are industrialized, to come up with measures and ways by which they can also protect the African countries or countries that are still developing, so that we can be able to have the effects of climate change being reduced. Because one thing that we also understand is that we need technologies probably to come up with to mitigate or to adapt. But lack of funding and also lack of skills, or not skills per se, but lack of finances, will not allow these countries to adjust their production systems. And therefore, we need to have these countries that are developed to bring in resources so that they can also leverage on our developing countries to be able to adapt to effects of climate change. So that's what I can say. I'm also very happy for the invite to also give my opinion on the matter, which is very, very important, that is climate change mitigation and effects. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Brother Sekaba Geoffrey, do you want to say something? Okay. I believe that we have given opinion, although we have not exhausted the subject, but because of time, I thank all the contributors and all those people who have listened to what we were discussing. I beseech God to bless all of you. And by that, we come to the end of this night forum. God bless you and have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, and thank you very much.
God bless you.
Good night. Thank you all. And good night. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you all.